Hello, and welcome back once again to Better Leader, Richer Life. This is week 8 of our course. After this, only 2 more left to go. We are now in the last phase of making change happen in your world as you continue with your experiment, enacting the third principle of being innovative, acting with creativity by continually experimenting. Last week, I talked about bringing others along with you as you implement an experiment designed to produce a 4-way win. I encouraged you to be artfully political, to build social capital, and to try to make a difference beyond what you can see. In this week's lecture, which draws on my sequel to the Total Leadership book, Leading the Life You Want, Skills for Integrating Work and Life, we'll explore further the importance of using your unique talents and passions to serve others. I'll tell you about the lives of 6 remarkable people and the lessons that those lives have for us about the skills needed for integrating work in the rest of life. As we move now into the last phase of our course, I'll offer these stories of these leaders' lives to help you reflect on your progress and to glean insights for your future growth, especially about the skills you want to focus on in the next steps of your journey as a developing leader. By the end of this week's lecture, you'll know more about how exemplary leaders integrate work and the rest of life throughout one's life. And you'll have thought about the skills you want to focus on next, which is part of what I'll ask you to write about in your progress report, which is the assignment for next week, the last assignment in our course. And this past week, you had yet another opportunity for feedback exchanges with your classmates. I hope it was useful for you to comment on what they wrote about in designing their experiments in Assignment 6 and to read what they wrote to you about your stakeholder dialogues in your Assignment 5. This week, you'll comment on what your classmates wrote in Assignment 7 about bringing others along with them in their experiments, and you'll see what they wrote to you about the design for your experiment in your Assignment 6. As always, keep in mind the goal in our learning community, and that is for you and all students to be compassionate, caring, and genuinely inquiring. Try to be helpful, as ever, and to remain open to learning from what others are saying to you, no matter what they say. Now, there's no other assignment for this week. That's so you can devote your attention to progressing on concluding your experiment. In this 8th week of our course, and for the remaining 2, there are 2 parts to the lecture, starting with this one. So, okay, let's talk about what we can learn from exemplary leaders about how to integrate work and the rest of life. To help you learn the skills and see them in action, I'll tell you a bit about the stories of 6 very different, remarkable people. Tom Tierney, Sheryl Sandberg, Eric Greitens, Michelle Obama, Julie Foudy, and Bruce Springsteen, about whom I've written. Each of these 6 models is a complicated mix of drives and desires, of wants and weaknesses, of confidence and self-scrutiny, just like you and me. And they're all ever evolving. So let me introduce them to you and then tell you about the skills each one of them best personifies. Tom Tierney is the co-founder of Bridgespan, and he's the former CEO of the powerhouse global consulting firm Bain & Company. He's also the author of the philanthropy guide, Give Smart. Throughout his incredibly accomplished career, he has sought creative ways of fitting the domains of his life together, including learning from his children about what really matters. He's built organizations that encourage personal growth by, for example, rewarding results and not face time, and by motivating people with an inspiring vision of contribution to a greater good. As COO of Facebook, Sheryl Sandberg has been redefining what it means to be a leader, especially now following the launch of her book, really social movement, Lean In. She is a powerful advocate for new models for women's advancement in society and in business. Ideas she conveys with the confidence of a seasoned storyteller. Her candor about the challenges she faces in resolving conflicts among different parts of her life as an executive, a a catalyst for social change, a friend, a wife, a sister, and a mother, and about the non-traditional means she employs for doing so, make her a persuasive, even if controversial, role model. Eric Greitens, former Navy SEAL, humanitarian, author, and nonprofit founder, has experienced many lifetimes worth of adventure. He was both a Rhodes Scholar and a Truman Scholar, and attended Oxford. After completing his PhD, Greitens forsook high-paying career opportunities for a chance to become a Navy SEAL, enduring military training that's often referred to as the hardest in the world. And for his service in Iraq, he was awarded a Purple Heart, and went on, after a difficult search for a meaningful next step to take in his life, to found The Mission Continues, which is an organization that helps heal wounded veterans by guiding them to be of service back home in their communities. Michelle Obama, the 44th First Lady of the United States and the first African-American woman in this position, stepped carefully into that role. The self-described mom-in-chief explains that she considers her daughters to be her first priority, even if this stance rankles those who would have her do more in seeking a broader political and cultural change in our world. In making sure her own children were receiving the most nutritious food possible, she began to advocate for better nutrition through the national initiative Let's Move. Her policies have won national acclaim and have had a huge impact. Julie Foudy is a soccer champion who in 1991, as a member of the United States national team, won the first Women's World Cup and then won bronze in 1995 and gold again in 1999. She was part of the iconic U.S. soccer team that garnered Olympic gold in 1996 and gold again in 2004. But Foudy is in this book because of what she's done beyond the soccer pitch. She's led an array of organizations that promote athletics for young people, empowering young women, and advocating for social causes. Foudy's success is an outgrowth of her passion for soccer, her insistence on pursuing the most fruitful expression of her talents, and her ability to fuse all the important parts of her life, her soccer teams, her family, and her advocacy for worthy causes. Now, while it may seem counterintuitive to think of a rock and roll hero as an exemplary leader, Bruce Springsteen is the real deal. Springsteen has said that he creates music to, quote, make people happy, feel less lonely, but also to be a conduit for a dialogue about the events of the day, the issues that impact people's lives, personal and social and political and religious, end quote. With his hard-won clarity of purpose, derived from years of painful self-scrutiny, it follows naturally that he makes clear what he expects from the people around him, whether members of his band or members of his family. He's called the boss for a reason. Now, there's no way these few can be fully representative. I chose them as illustrative models. You don't have to identify with all those I chose to learn from their examples. You might even be tempted to shrug them off because it's not easy to relate to people who have all the money in the world, beautiful and supportive spouses, bosses who really care about them, or supersized native talents. But their stories can open you up to new ways of thinking and acting. I'm sure you can think of others, and I hope you do. Finding your own models will deepen your grasp of the total leadership skills and of their practical value to you. I started a thread on our Total Leadership Facebook page, on our group rather, where I've invited you to share the story of a leader who you know or admire and who demonstrate the principles and skills that we've been talking about here. So if you're not a member, please ask to join this Facebook group, and I hope you'll visit to share a story and to read the stories that others are telling about inspiring leaders who demonstrate how to succeed in all parts of life. In each of the stories in the book, I found naturally occurring illustrations of people who did great things by discovering, usually through trial and error, ways to integrate the different parts of their lives so that they reinforced and enhanced each other. These stories show that while these people seem on the surface to be unusually talented or just lucky, they're actually 6 flawed people who've been engaged in a lifelong quest to align aspects of their lives through some very specific behaviors. Still, you might be asking, well, does it really make sense to try to learn leadership and life lessons from the likes of such extraordinary human beings? These are not everyday people. Lest you think that their success derives just from great luck, think again. Because not one of them was born into a life of high privilege. They have strived to achieve their own kind of greatness and, one way or another, to make themselves into who they are now. Each has suffered disappointment. Half of them are on second marriages. Frustration, doubt, and loss. They're human, just like you and me. And I hope you'll see possibilities for yourself in all of them. These narratives, they show how accomplishment in a career is achievable not at the expense of the rest of your life, but because of commitments at home, in the community, and in your interior life. Each of these people is imperfect, more like you and me than you might imagine. And each has had a significant impact on the world, beyond family, work, and the private self. Each one strives to lead a meaningful life, and they've all made choices that integrate the different parts of their lives. This, in turn, results in both professional success and a full life that inspires them and enhances the lives of others. They defy the myth of the zero-sum game in which success in your career means failure in the rest of your life, and vice versa. They help us see how you can cultivate a life in which values, actions, social contribution, and personal growth exist in harmony, like a great piece of jazz music. This is a life in which disparate pieces fall into place, not every single day. That's the impossible myth of work-life balance, but over the course of time. Like these 6, you can attain significant achievement in a way that fits who you are in your life circumstances. Indeed, you have to, because as these great leaders prove, and as I hope you're learning in our course, your own way is the only way that's going to work for you. So a question for you to consider now as we're starting the process of reflecting on our work together in this course and then looking forward to growing further in the future is this: how did they get there? And what can I learn from these people as I think about the skills I want to focus on next? So let me now tell you about the skills each of them best personifies. And as you're watching, think about which of these 18 skills you want to give your attention to now. Your focus might be on the same skills you mentioned at the start of our course, or they might be new. Your emphasis might have changed in light of what you've been learning here. Examining his life philosophy in his journal, Tom Tierney once wrote, "Those that succeed build lives first and resumes second. When they stare in the mirror, they don't just see a professional, they see a parent, a spouse, a friend, and a member of the community." Tierney knows that a leader plays many roles in life, and he seems to revel in the complex task of finding creative ways to make them work well together. He's traveled a winding path, from inconsistent student to California bus driver, engineer in the Algerian desert to Harvard MBA, consultant to high-flying CEO, author to full-time charitable volunteer. He's been a perpetual traveler, devoted father, and a significant mentor to people who are themselves great leaders in their own right. All along his remarkable journey, Tierney's deep-seated values, on which he regularly and critically reflects, guide him like a lodestar. The disciplined creativity he applies to his commitments, large and small, enables him to learn as he joyfully serves other people with stellar results. He's faced obstacles and made mistakes. He's fallen down and gotten back up again. And at every juncture, he's adopted the same approach, asking others and himself, am I getting better? Then he's taken the steps necessary to answer positively that question. He contributes his boundless energy and his keen intellect to the people and things that matter to him by envisioning his legacy, weaving the domains of his life together coherently, and seeing new ways of doing things. While Tierney is an exemplar of numerous other skills, I'm going to talk about just the first one here. Tom Tierney has a vision for where he's headed, the legacy he wants to leave, and how to pursue what is most important in his life. Tierney knows not only where he's been, but where he's going. He can paint a vivid picture of the life that he wants to lead, visualizing himself in 5, 10, and even 20 years. Not only does he have a compelling image of an achievable future, something which you wrote a few weeks ago, he has a sense of how to achieve that vision. And while he may not have all the details figured out, he understands the values that will guide him on the path to realizing his dreams. A leader living the life he wants needs to form an optimistic yet realistic picture of the world he wants to create. Tierney takes very seriously the substantial investment of his attention to thinking through where he's been, what he's done, and what he's learned about where he wants to go next. His dedication to journaling and the practical knowledge that emerges from this rigorous and regular self-examination demonstrates how he goes about envisioning a future that makes sense to him, a future that is congruent with who he wants to be and how he wants to be remembered. Tierney's focus on his own evolution is displayed in the decisions he's made when facing forks in the road. For example, in 1990, during a time of crisis at Bain, he resolved to stay because he knew that his departure would be a devastating signal of indifference to the long-term interests of the firm. But some years later, after Bain found its footing and then some, at the peak of his powers as CEO, he chose to leave in the prime of his career and launch a small nonprofit startup. Not a standard move, and not what would matter in the eyes of the many elite people in the world of top-tier consulting firms. So why did he do it? Well, Tierney pursued Bridgespan because the new venture allowed him to apply his now masterful knowledge of how to improve organizations that helped causes closer to his core values. And as the nonprofit organization spread its wings, as he multiplied his impact by enabling others to help those in need, he saw yet greater opportunity to use his energy, his talent, and his networks. He dreamed of doing even greater good by re-examining and reimagining the world of philanthropy. By teaching wealthy people who want to help others the lessons he's learned from his own experience about how to focus on and create a future that matters, his impact as a leader of positive social change ripples further and further outward. When I ask people who know Tom Tierney well to describe him, the word I heard most often was disciplined. He has dedicated such serious attention to asking himself, how do I define real success in my life? And after he answers this question, he acts on what he says to himself. Perhaps this is why, in the world of philanthropy, he finds himself once again to be the beating heart of an enterprise devoted to using available resources to make things better for others. With his penchant for tracking just about everything he cares about, he knows exactly where he stands in pursuit of his most critical goals. He reflects on his failures and his successes, and then looks at the day ahead, and the next day, and the next week, and the next month, and the next year to see if he's on target. Then he adjusts accordingly, even if it means walking away from positions with great power and income. Tierney, whose father taught him to believe in the little guy, preaches the ideology that employees are people first, with lives that matter, wherever he goes, and he applies that to his own life. He puts his family first. This commitment to his life beyond work, it didn't detract from his career success. To the contrary, it fortified his capacity as a business executive and inspired others, animating his achievements at work and in society. The four domains of his life all win. His avid thirst for useful knowledge has made it possible for him to evolve, to continually become the person he wants to become, while never forgetting his purpose, which is to serve, something all of us are capable of doing better. Sheryl Sandberg is not just a deeply engaged COO in an important company. She's also striving to live a life in which seemingly disparate parts are integrated in mutually beneficial ways. With her massive wealth, it would seem four-way wins might be just a piece of cake for her. It's easy to have it all, right, when you've got billions of dollars and all the support you need. But Sandberg's rise to prominence hasn't been so easy. She's worked hard on her skills, and I want to focus on one of them. It's really important. Sheryl Sandberg tells stories of the key events that have shaped her in a way that brings her closer to other people. She can pinpoint events in her life that have played a meaningful role in the development of her values. She allows others to gain insight into her authentic self by sharing her true stories. And she's willing to talk about the people and experiences that have shaped who she is today. She displays both confidence and vulnerability by opening herself up to others. And this lays the foundation for building relationships based on mutual honesty, appreciation, and trust. Telling powerful stories is a part of clarifying what's important, being real. We articulate our values and, in doing so, commit to them. Sandberg's high-profile life is full of engaging storytelling, especially when she recounts episodes that have made her want to advocate for gender equality. Sandberg encourages men and women, but especially women, to think through their own positions on hiring, on promotion, and the politics of everyday life in organizations. She also gives specific advice for how to deal with obstacles, such as with salary negotiations. She's learned how to be open about her own insecurities and her tendency to yield too quickly. So with self-deprecating humor, she describes how her views on women and work have evolved as a result of her personal experience. In telling stories in which she's the protagonist, Sandberg becomes more accessible to the people who are listening, to people who are reading her book, so that those people can see themselves in her stories. This identification makes it easier both to trust and to follow her as a leader. The story of the forgotten women's restroom, in which she was at a board meeting and the people running it didn't know where to direct her during a break. And that was signifying to her that they just didn't care. That story creates a closer bond with her audience, while also making the case for a change in norms about gender equality. When one person is willing to reveal an awkward moment in which she felt slighted, even degraded, a dialogue is sparked. The humor gets Sandberg's audiences engaged, and it has the ring of truth. And so it gives her the opportunity to describe how, despite her rise to the top of the corporate world, she's experienced the problems of inequality for women. She gets it. And while it might seem paradoxical, it's this vulnerability that enables Sandberg to capture attention and argue for change. Beyond the numbers gap, Sandberg is intent on calling attention to the chronic confidence gap that underlies women's failures to achieve what men have. She's seen this gap in her own life, and to help close it, both for herself and others, she uses stories, like the one about 3 students, including her, in a college course in European intellectual history. Her roommate read the course materials in the original Greek and Latin and sat in rapt attention at lectures. Sandberg read the books in English and attended most lectures. Sandberg's younger brother, however, who was also in the course, read only one of the 12 assigned books and dipped in and out of lectures. After the final exam, the three were chatting about how well they thought they'd done. It was a striking conversation. Sandberg's roommate felt horrible about the exam, concerned that she hadn't drawn out the main point of the Hegelian dialectic. Sandberg's brother confidently predicted, "I got the top grade in the class." This story gets people laughing, but it reveals a leadership skill that Sandberg is using knowingly. It recounts an experience to which others can relate and allows her to point to the disparity between otherwise evenly matched men and women in professional settings. In telling this story, she's talking about the all too common confidence gap between female overachievers and male achievers. Sandberg now tells this story to make her case for why attitudes and behaviors have to change. And it works because it's an authentic expression of her interest in a cause that is personally meaningful and socially relevant. It conveys values through a story. As with first wave feminists who came before her and whom she is quick to praise, in Sandberg's life, the personal has become the political. She could have quietly retained her high-powered position as Facebook's COO, but instead, she uses her power and visibility to champion a cause for all women and men. So by intentionally revealing personal vignettes in Lean In, her book, Sandberg brings people closer to her and shows them how to take their own specific actions to insist on their own advancement. She challenges them, as she challenges herself, by asking, "What would you do if you weren't afraid?" Again, she's conveying her values with the stories of her life. Many people can see in those stories their own struggles, and so they're inspired to try to change things themselves. And this is the final result of this particular skill, influencing other people to act in accordance with their own values and beliefs as they pursue dreams of their own. Her revealing and instructive book has become a powerful example of a high-impact four-way win, producing value for her work, her family, her community, and herself. She's a new breed of executive, one who meets the competing demands of running a supercharged global company and rears children and contributes to society through philanthropy and advances the cause of gender equality and nurtures a successful dual career marriage following the failure of her first, and stays connected to a wide array of friends and members of her community, while also remaining present as both a child and a sister. So for her, it's not yielding to either or, it's searching for both and. She has struggled. She has adapted. She has felt intense guilt, particularly as a mother. But she's actively pursuing four-way wins over the long run. Her professional success has come not so much at the expense of the other parts of her life, as it has derived from her commitments to family, as she's learned how to teach what she's learned from striving to enact a 50-50 marriage, to serve society, as she's taken lessons from her public sector life into her work both at Google and Facebook, and to develop herself as she's learning continually from coaches, mentors, and others. Her conscience compels her to think about being a good person, living a good life, one that creates value for others, and is founded on the ideals forged in the smithy of her experience. Sandberg was developing these skills long before her meteoric professional rise. So no matter where you come from, and no matter where you are in the arc of your life, Sandberg offers a model for how to shape your life by using stories that teach, by building networks that provide support, and continually seeking to resolve tensions among the different parts of life. Coaches, mentors, friends, and family can also help you to develop the kinds of skills that Sandberg illustrates in ways that fit the particulars of your life. And when these skills help us find four-way wins, not only do we succeed in our work, but we live meaningful lives. Eric Greitens is the youngest of the 6 great leaders I've portrayed. He leaps forward to credit his mentors, both in his family, secondary school, college, in the boxing ring, in graduate school, in humanitarian endeavors, as well as his role models in the military and in the nonprofit world. But Greitens has brought to his training a relentless quest for new knowledge about the best ways to apply his innate talents in the service of helping others. He's used his knowledge about the psychology of resilience, learned in war-torn and poverty-stricken places around the world, as well as from his own training, to start an organization that provides effective service as healing opportunities for fellow veterans. The success of the mission continues, along with its growing number of supporters, are testimony to his leadership skills. Like the other subjects I've profiled, Greitens embodies all of the skills, but he's an especially good exemplar of these 3: choosing to hold himself accountable, applying all your resources from all parts of your life, and focusing on results. Let's look closely at the second of these 3. Greitens uses skills and contacts from different parts of his life to help meet needs and goals in other parts of his life. When pursuing his goals, Greitens thinks creatively about skills, relationships, and ways of thinking that he's developed in the various domains of his life. He doesn't force his relationships into these rigidly defined categories or roles. Barb Osberg, for example, isn't just his 11th grade English teacher, she's also a lifelong mentor that he talked with as he struggled to conceive his post-Navy SEALs life. His story is so captivating because, as the film director J.J. Abrams told me, Greitens is a man in whom, quote, form and function are one. Nothing is in conflict with itself. Greitens uses what he picks up in one part of his life and applies it to achieve goals in other parts. For example, he used the attitude and skills he had acquired as a boxer in the domain of his private self, and the knowledge and insight gleaned from his time as a humanitarian worker, his community service, in his career as a military officer, his profession. Inspired by his grandfather's stories, Greitens studied boxing with a series of men who understood that the game was as much about physical training for technical excellence as it was about developing the psychological tools for winning combat. Greitens learned that preparation is all, that one can and must remain calm in the face of fear, and that one should fight honorably. It's not surprising that Greitens devoted more attention in his wonderful memoir, The Heart and the Fist, to preparation for action than to any other subject. He learned from role models and teachers the sanctity of a careful, ritualized process of getting ready. He applied this in the Navy, too. As a commander, he built the confidence of his troops by helping them see that effort dedicated to building strength led to greatness. In the ring, he learned that he could manage fear for, as he said, when uncontrolled, it rots the mind and impairs the body. This understanding proved essential in his life as a warrior, from the rigors of Hell Week to the terrors of Afghanistan and Iraq. He learned from his boxing mentors that victory must be won with integrity, according to a set of values that proscribe torture and treasure human dignity. This insight helped Greitens understand, when he was fighting the Taliban, what distinguishes a warrior from a thug, as he put it. In Rwanda's refugee camps, in Bosnia's bullet-infested villages, in Bolivia's violent streets, and other gut-wrenching places where he went to provide assistance to children in need, Greitens acquired insight about resilience. He also learned practical ideas for forging basic human connections between unfamiliar peoples. He brought these assets gained from his experience serving the global community to his work in the military, as when he got himself and his squad through Hell Week, the training period, by focusing not on personal pain, but on the team, and in founding The Mission Continues. The big idea for Greitens is that people in need are best helped to gain strength and recover from trauma by being challenged with opportunities to be of use. Wherever he went on his humanitarian ventures, he saw the truth of this existential principle, viscerally described by the Holocaust survivor and philosopher Viktor Frankl in his book, Man's Search for Meaning. People feel better about themselves when they're helping other people, and despair and helplessness when they're not able to do so. Greitens had a vision for how to apply this insight when he visited wounded veterans after his combat experience. And this was the originating concept for The Mission Continues, which organizes opportunities for wounded veterans to express this compulsion to serve. His skill was to transfer this idea, picked up in one part of his life, and use it to good effect in another part, just as he uses the military concept of commander's intent in his role as CEO of his nonprofit organization. But gaining support for The Mission Continues has not been easy because, despite good intentions, most of society views veterans as worthy of charity, not as assets who could themselves provide help. Greitens' success in persuading others to believe in his innovative point of view, which seems so clear and intuitively logical, springs from what he learned about how to overcome resistance and get people on your side. Quoting one of the first fellows of The Mission Continues now, just convincing anybody that the approach for wounded veterans should be to tell them to get off their butts and do something for their community produces cognitive dissonance. That's what Chris Marvin told me. He was actually the first Mission Continues fellow and a student in my class here at Wharton a number of years ago. Greitens' on-the-ground training in diverse societies taught him that relationships come first, before strategy and deals. Forging alliances and achieving goals requires mutual respect and often cultural understanding. He learned this in Cambodia, in a fishing village, and then applied it in Kenya, chatting with locals at the fruit market to build alliances that led to valuable intelligence. His capacity to see others as deserving of dignity, which was ingrained in him during years in the field as an aid worker, enables him to forge connections, build trust, and augment his impact as a leader. In his humanitarian service, and then in the military, he developed the ability to overcome resistance. He then applied this skill in another domain of his life, his new nonprofit. Greitens searched his soul in his 20s and chose an uncertain future as a Navy SEAL. He acted on what he had learned from the failures to save innocents that he had observed overseas. He developed the belief that one needed to secure safety before humanitarian efforts could be effective. Out of his post-war personal doldrums, he envisioned a realistic way to ennoble veterans by enlisting them to serve here at home. This wasn't just entrepreneurship. It was a way to hold himself accountable for acting on his beliefs. He told me that he sees the integration of his life not occurring in specific moments of perfect balance, but rather in phases. The different strands of his life weave together over the course of time, from boxing to humanitarian work to military service to providing a means for healing by his fellow veterans. For Greitens, leadership is about harmony over time, not balance all the time. And it's in the service of producing not financial gain, but a meaningful life. In his effort to preserve human dignity, Greitens uses whatever tools are at his disposal. He pursues his goal while dedicating himself to improving his own fitness to serve through constant learning and training of his mind, body, and spirit. His example shows again that professional achievement is the result of devotion to the other parts of his life. In his case, the values of his family, the needs of his community and society, and his own deeply held personal beliefs. He inspires us to consider how we can learn to be more accountable for what we say we believe in, to be better able to work with what we have, and to be more attuned to our goals while finding creative ways to progress toward them. Life in the White House bubble is a world away from the bungalow that she grew up in, but South Side values, South Side of Chicago that is, give Michelle Obama's life continuity, and they guide her in both the public and private spheres. She follows her own moral compass, often in the face of intense pressure to do otherwise, when making decisions big and small. The public initiatives that she's undertaken build on her core values, and they reflect her ability to adapt and act on these values on a vast scale under the glare of the hottest spotlight. Michelle Obama has broken barriers and is an inspiration to millions around the world. She is a powerful model of someone who has grown up to become a leader with a rewarding life that brings the four domains together in a way that works for her and the people who depend on her. Although she embodies many other skills, knowing who she is and what matters, being clear about what she expects from others, and challenging the status quo, just to name a few, in my profile of her, I focus on what she's learned about how to align her actions with her values, manage boundaries intelligently, and embrace change courageously. Let's look at the second of these three. Obama is able to create boundaries between the different parts of her life to help her meet important needs and goals. She knows when to merge the different aspects of her life, and she knows when to separate them. She exercises this skill when deciding to create boundaries that allow for focus on a single responsibility, like her family. She also creates boundaries for the rest of her family, respecting the shelter that she and her family require by ensuring that they dine together as often as possible. This commitment to maintaining boundaries has been the pattern in her adult life. At Sidley, the law firm in Chicago, where she worked soon after law school, she lived on the South Shore rather than downtown Chicago, and she didn't hang out much with her coworkers. They didn't even know when her father died. But this doesn't mean that she's rigid in managing the boundaries between the different parts of her life. Her choices demonstrate intelligent flexibility. At first, she turned down Barack Obama's romantic assertions, as I describe in my biographical profile, thinking it unprofessional to date a coworker. Perhaps most significantly, although she was reluctant to commit her family to a White House campaign, not to mention the public demands of a first family, Michelle Obama adjusted. As ever, she did so in her own distinctive way. After all, her mother lives at the White House. When the children were younger, she carved out self-time to work out in the morning, and at the same time compelled her husband to take some domestic responsibilities. This isn't just managing boundaries, it's also creating four-way wins, right? This made her feel better about herself, it improved family functioning, and it shaped the attitude and behavior of the man who would be president in a way that made him, for many potential voters, a more attractive candidate. Despite the constant hum of computers and smartphones and various demands, Obama is able to turn her attention to one thing at a time, rather than trying to accomplish everything at once. Some people are by nature private, others social. Michelle Obama seems to be one of those introverted types who, because of her commitment to service, has had to rise to many occasions of being in a super public role. I saw this myself when I was with her at the White House Forum on Workplace Flexibility in 2010. She was attentively engaged with each person she spoke to, with sustained, relaxed, yet unwavering eye contact. At the same time, she was clearly self-contained. In our modern world, it takes real leadership skill to both maintain one's focus while moving flexibly and gracefully from one person or task to another. Michelle Obama learned on the rough and tumble road of the first White House campaign trail that the public doesn't always want leaders who choose transparency over opacity. With her, she unapologetically suggested, what you see is what you get. But this doesn't mean that she's immutable. Her continual self-exploration and the deliberate decisions that come from that allow Obama to quite consciously act according to her values, not according to what others want her to be. And those values keep her close to her family and to real people on the ground to whom she listens with care. Doing so makes her effective in seeking realistic ways to better their lives. As First Lady, she helps children embrace healthy choices, ensures veterans are treated with dignity, and provides a model for young women around the world by demonstrating how to be a strong, caring mother who achieves significant goals by serving the world beyond one's home. Her success as a public figure and the voice of our nation's first family is a direct consequence of her adherence to her core values and her dedication to family and community. She's open about the difficulties she's faced as a person of color, the duplicities of the political world, and the challenges of protecting her children from the vagaries of White House life. This candor, combined with her genuine commitment to advocating for those in need, not to mention her great sense of humor and humility, explain her unusual popularity. She leads the life she wants. Countless others have benefited from Julie Foudy's courage to take action and mobilize people toward goals that matter. Not content with winning at the very highest levels of her sport, inspired by the injustices she encountered on her path to soccer glory, Foudy has turned her talents to making things better for future generations of athletes through her political action and her role as an educator. As a result of her perseverance, and with the support of family, teammates, friends, and coaches, she has cultivated leadership skills as an athlete and as a public advocate for gender equality and human rights. Like the other 5 examples that I've been talking with you about, she illustrates all the skills, but I focus on what Foudy's life teaches us about how to know what matters, help others, and challenge the status quo. Foudy challenges traditional assumptions about how things are done, experimenting to make things better whenever possible. When making decisions about how to spend her time and energy, she isn't constrained by conventions. Rather than follow the pack, she's willing to be the first one to try new ways of accomplishing goals. She's not overly concerned about how others will perceive her. Instead, she's willing to step out on a limb to find a creative solution to the challenges she faces. So, for example, by traveling to Pakistan to see for herself the conditions under which Reebok products were made, Foudy confronted the traditional path taken by sponsored athletes. She demonstrated that she wasn't willing to take a great cash deal without first drawing attention to a human rights issue. And in doing so, she inspired other athletes to follow her lead. Battling the forces that would repeal Title IX regulations to create parity for women's sports, which she did in 2002 and beyond, required investing time and energy in a cause about which she felt deeply. Her actions in expressing dissent demonstrated her willingness to challenge sexist institutional arrangements. In the face of the Commission's majority recommendation to weaken Title IX, others might have lost their cool or quit in protest. She applied the relentless tenacity she had come to know as an ingredient for success on the soccer field. On a team, she recalled, quote, "You're sometimes going to have to make decisions that aren't popular and talk to teammates who maybe aren't, staying with the team's principles and foundations." Quote. Asked by an interviewer what she would change if she had a magic wand, Foudy said recently, "You find so many kids who grow up and think, well, I'm not this or I'm not that, so I can't be a leader. It's not what I see in magazines. That's not what I read in history books. I don't look that way. I don't sound that way. I don't have a CEO or president next to my name. Quote, if I could, which is what we're doing with the Leadership Academy, she said, I would open up the definition of leadership so all kids understood that yes, you do have it. It just comes in different forms. We don't all have the same type of leadership skills, so figure out what your leadership skill set is and be true to that. Foudy is using her talents and her time in the service of giving younger women the encouragement and tools they need to question cultural messages they've internalized about the limits of what's possible. She contests outmoded models. Because she knew what mattered to her, Julie Foudy was inspiring and vivid about the dream. We will have a women's cup team, she said. She'd suffered the consequences of gender inequity, saw how she wanted women's soccer to advance, and then stood up for the rights of women athletes, her people, in the face of injustice, with the hope of leaving the sport in a better state than when she started. Foudy's is an admirable life story because she's achieved success in her professional world by reaping the benefits of harmonious integration among the different parts of her life. We see the pursuit of four-way wins as she strives to create value not only in her career, but also in her role as a family member, as an advocate for women's empowerment, and for her own personal growth and health. Based on her own experience and from what she learned about how the importance of girls having a different mindset about what they could accomplish, she committed to helping build their confidence. Choose to matter is what girls gleefully chant at her training camps. And when she needed support in mustering the will to challenge long-standing traditions, she asked for it from mentors like Billie Jean King and teachers of her own. Just like you can do. Leader, well, that isn't usually the first noun that people would attach to Bruce Springsteen. The eldest of the people I've chosen to study for this project. He is, however, the executive of a very high-performing organization. But more importantly, his persistent expression of hope and joy in the face of the disappointments of a cruel world, spoken not with resentment, but with resilience, has inspired tens of millions of people worldwide. Throughout his career, he's looked for opportunities to help other people, to strengthen his broad community of fans by bringing people together in common cause. The poetry of his lyrics, with its universal themes about making our way in the world, struggling to hold on to joy, raging against injustice, and reveling in the laughter and sorrows of intimate relationships, it unites listeners everywhere. The late Clarence Clemons, saxophonist in Springsteen's E Street Band, once described the astonishing sight of countless Japanese fans proudly waving American and Japanese flags that had been sewn together. He said, "I wish some of the politicians had seen these things. Those kids, they didn't understand the words to Born in the USA, but they understood what we were singing about. Those things Bruce sings about, attention to self and country. They pertain not only to America, they pertain to everybody." When Springsteen performed before a crowd of 160,000 in East Berlin in 1988, he declared from the stage in thickly accented German, "I want to tell you I'm not here for or against any government. I came to play rock and roll for you, East Berliners, in the hope that one day all the barriers will be torn down." Standing for his values was contagious. Again, Clemons said, "He was always so straight and dedicated to what he believes. You became a believer by simply being around him." We see many skills in Bruce Springsteen's quest for greatness in his work and coherence in his life, including how he learned the skill of managing boundaries. He offers a particularly good illustration of the skills of acting in ways that are consistent with your values, clarifying expectations, and learning continually. I'm going to focus on this last one. Springsteen looks for opportunities to show others how he's learning new ways of doing things and encourages them to innovate. He creates what I'll call cultures of innovation wherever he goes. He sees the service his band provides as producing opportunities for people to explore the important issues of the day. Leading by example, he empowers others to be creative. He displays both confidence, which grew with time and experience, and humility, as he shares with others both his successes and the obstacles he faces. His enthusiasm for learning and fearlessness is contagious, and it inspires others to embrace new opportunities. A main ingredient in Springsteen's recipe for success, personally and professionally, is his thirst for useful knowledge, his desire to change the world, to create something new that makes things better, and to change himself. A wise old man offering advice to up-and-coming musicians, he recounted how this is exactly what he was up to back at the start, trying desperately to create a new person from what he had been when he talked to the South by Southwest crowd in 2012 about his hunger to learn and how he had to step out of the mold to discover his own musical style. He was urging his audience to innovate continually, these young musicians. Well, not only has he been on a lifelong search for better ways to express his ideas in music, Springsteen's been on almost a lifelong quest to better understand his inner life. Here, too, he's used his own experience to inspire others to try new ways of growing. His own psychotherapy demonstrates his belief in the value of disciplined self-discovery. Therapy helped Springsteen work through the scars of his childhood and learn how to appreciate non-musical activities in his life, especially real intimacy and family life. Expressing insight about lessons he's learned about himself encourages others to keep learning about themselves, whether through therapy or something else. His pursuit of self-knowledge through counseling turned him into a kind of role model, destigmatizing it and opening doors for people, especially men, who might not otherwise seek that kind of help. It wasn't easy to talk about these things publicly, but Springsteen mustered the will and the skill to do so. He crafted an analogy, going to your auto mechanic to check under the hood, to help communicate what he was doing in his therapy. He shows others that there are practical means available to them, tools they can use to heal their own scars. Springsteen is a teacher. He was lucky. He discovered very early that the only thing that made him feel right about his life was his guitar. He found the one thing that he was perfectly suited for and gave it everything: to learn his craft, to remain true to his beliefs, to secure the resources he needed to build what became a world-class team, to care for the people who depend on him, and to commit to serving his people and making them a bit happier and more informed about the joys and sorrows of our world through his music. His megastar success as a performing artist has come as a consequence of, and not at a cost to, his deep investments in his family, his community, and his private self. His music is enriched by these other parts of his life, and his music is the vehicle through which he's able to live a rewarding life beyond it. You too can strengthen your ability to pursue four-way wins and create a greater sense of harmony in your life. That's what you're doing here in our course. And in the next video, I'll talk more about the skills for integrating work and the rest of life and help you to think through what's next on your learning journey.